Welcome to Gavels Down, Voices Up with me, Rachel King. This is where we leave convention at the courtroom door and dive into your real stories, bold and unpopular opinions, and change-making ideas that really shake the legal world up and change where change is desperately needed. I'm here to shake it up, talk about unfiltered insights, and amplify voices that need to be heard. So are you ready? Let's get it. Put the gavels down and the voices up. Welcome back to Gavels Down, Voices Up. My name's Rachel King. I'm an attorney, and I'm here to try and bring a little bit of information that I've learned over the years practicing law for, now nearly a decade to you. I'm in court quite often. I've heard the gamut. You know, they say that everything is confidential with your attorney, which is true, but that also means that we hear the good stuff. Also, because I'm in court almost on a daily basis, that's probably more than the average person. So I get to hear different background things from judges, how they've made different decisions, some of their dicta, which is what we call just their nonsense going on. Maybe it's not nonsense. We should actually pay attention to it because it gives insight into how they're thinking and why they're ruling. Why is that important? Because if you know what a judge is thinking, or how they're likely to interpret information, it can help you frame your argument or your presentation of evidence. And the bottom line is the judges are given a lot of power in our country. And so if there's anything that we can do to make it go a little bit better, I'm all about it. Some judges are super particular and want documents on certain color paper with page numbers, all of the things. Others, they don't even really want to see it. They just want you to tell them what it says. I've seen judges handle information in all different ways. And my rule of thumb as an attorney is to figure out how that judge wants it and to hand it to them on a silver platter. And hopefully some of the information that I've learned over the years can help you. I am going to talk all about home ownership hassles today. That's right. You hear all over the media from investment advisors that owning a home is the best financial investment. And I'm not here to say whether that's true or not. I'm not a financial advisor. I own my house. In fact, I've dipped my toe into investing in real estate as a way to fund my retirement, but still not going to weigh in on whether that's a good idea or a bad idea. Maybe check back in with me in 30 years and see how my retirement is going, and I'll be able to say, yes, good idea, or, shoot, I wish I'd done something different. In any event, owning a home can come with some pretty annoying hassles. And I'm not talking about the roof needing to be repaired or the septic system going out just a few days after you buy the house. I'm talking about home ownership legally, and specifically today we're going to be talking about title issues. So on a house, you have a deed, and your deed says who is the legal owner to the house. The law typically presumes that whoever is on that deed is the legal owner of that house. And in most cases, that is true. But in these few that I'm going to highlight today, it can become a royal mess, a huge disaster that is not only time-consuming, frightfully expensive, because in every one of these cases we're going to talk about the court needed to be involved, and they're sort of technical, maybe not even sort of, maybe very technical, and they required an attorney and a huge amount of litigation. So there was one, in fact, that we'll talk about where the whole family kind of imploded on itself because of what happened. So let's talk about some of these nightmares that can come with home ownership, and maybe that'll give you some insight as to whether or not you should do these things, or if you need to take a second look on owning a home, how you own your home, or what's going to happen. Horror story number one. You want a house, but you can't really afford it from a credit perspective, or maybe a proof of income perspective. This was really common back after the 2009 crash, where people's houses were foreclosed on, their credit was destroyed, they wanted to be able to buy a new house, but they couldn't, or their credit, again, they didn't have proof of income. I see it more and more recently with people that are cash employees or don't have the ability to get a loan. Bank statement loans are a little bit more tricky these days. We're talking about, in this particular horror story, man wanted to buy a house. This was shortly after the 2009 dive. Couldn't get a house, couldn't buy a house because there was some short sale or something on his history, so he couldn't buy a house, but he wanted to. He could afford it on a monthly basis when it looked at his income, but he couldn't get a loan. So he talked to his family members, and his sister actually came in and said, you know what, I'll go on loan. I'll buy the house. You just pay the mortgage. It's all for you. I'm just kind of doing you a solid by being the one on paper. Well, when you get the loan, you go on title as the owner, right? So that's what happened. Sister got the loan. She was on title, but brother was the one that it was intended for. He was the one that put the down payment on the house for an extended period of time. We'll say maybe 5 or 6 years until this dispute happened. He'd paid all of the mortgage. He'd never been late. He paid all of the taxes, all of the insurance, all of the maintenance. He was the only one that occupied. Everybody in the family understood this to be brother's house. Well, then real estate appreciates, and it especially appreciated between the time that we had the dive after 2009 and present day today, right? We've seen a huge increase. If you were one of those lucky ones, I call them, that came in and swooped up a foreclosure or short sale back then, you've made a bucket of money. I didn't get to do that. Anyway, so the house goes up, right? 5-6 years go by, the market's recovered, this house is worth quite a bit of money. Sister has some financial hardships, is going through a divorce, and goes and says, I want to sell my house. And brother's like, what are you talking about? This is my house. And sister says, nope, I'm on title. It's my loan. I want out. I want to sell it. And she starts the story that she was the one that bought the house, doing brother a solid so that he could have a place to live after his previous house got short saled or foreclosed. And his rent was the cost of the maintenance, the taxes, and the mortgage. So basically all of the money that he'd been paying into was going to be treated like rent. So sister creates this entire story, and actually sister goes and puts the house on the market, and brother's over here like, whoa, this is my house. Well, what ensued was an incredibly long and emotional litigation that did break up the family because the family wanted to stay out of it. They'd always understood that it was brother's house, that sister was doing this solid, but then ultimately they didn't want to get in between. Parents didn't want to get in between their kids. They all wanted to stay out. So ultimately, none of the family ended up testifying, and the court relied very heavily on text message and email exchanges. In real estate, in this court, the judge said, look, a contract for real estate must be in writing. It's the statute of frauds. It's a big thing. Look it up if you want to learn about it, but I'll tell you, in law school, it's a big, huge hassle. We take a long time learning about the statute of frauds. But basically, purchase of real estate or real estate ownership falls under the statute of frauds. And the court said, if I'm going to say, brother, that this is your house, I need something in writing that says that was intended to be your house. Otherwise, we have the documents, we have sister on the loan, we have sister on title, so that's kind of how I'm going to assume it. Brother went back, pulled all of the text messages, all of the emails. He did pull all the financial records to show that he'd paid it. And there was a few text messages and emails, very brief, way long time ago, before the house even was closed in escrow, where sister had said, yes, that's fine, I understand what we're doing, and it had some language like that. It was enough for the court to say, yeah, brother, I think this is your house. But brother was in for over $50,000, I think over a year, in litigation, fighting his sister in a family drama, all because he didn't have the title in his name. There was no actual contract that exists. I'll tell you what, this is not the first time I've seen a case like this. It happens so often because as a family, you're like, yeah, let's help each other out, maybe a friend, until there's something else that goes wrong. Had sister in this case not gone through a divorce, not faced some financial hardship, it might not have played out as it was. If the real estate market had tanked instead of appreciated, probably also wouldn't have ended out this way. So, horror story number one, you try and do a good deed, and what do they say? No good deed goes unpunished. But in this case, actually, sister was saying she was going to do a good deed, and then she turned out to be the monster. So, poor brother, really happens, not the only one. I'm interested to know if you've heard horror story number one or any variation of that.
And now for a quick break. This episode of Gavels Down, Voices Up is proudly brought to you by King Law Firm Attorneys at Law Incorporated. We're not just about winning cases, we're about making a difference. Whether it's family law, probate litigation, or standing up against elder abuse, we bring experience, empathy, and excellence to the courtroom. At King Law Firm, we're more than lawyers. We're your team, in your corner, advocating for your rights and making your voice heard. Visit us at thelawyerking.com and on the socials at The Lawyer King to see how we fight with you and for you. King Law Firm Attorneys at Law Incorporated, where your fight becomes our fight. Now, let's get that episode.
Horror story number two. This happens over and over and over and over again and is maybe more common than horror story number one. Still all family, right? Because as much as we love family, it's the family drama that gets us going and riled up. And people fight in families, so much. Maybe it's because you can't just walk away, right? When you're not friends with somebody anymore, you just say, peace out, I'm out of here. But when it's family, it's like you're kind of stuck with holidays. You maybe feel like you have to hang out or talk or work it out. And man, if a parent isn't putting pressure on siblings to get together, I don't even know if the world is real. I know we have sibling trauma in my house. We're all adults. I think it was just until recently that my parents finally backed off and let us siblings have our own relationships, or in our case, non-relationships. So if it's family, there's gonna be drama. That's what happens in horror story number two. In this story, mom and dad are getting older. Dad has a stroke. Mom has dementia. Dementia is not horrible. Dad isn't completely debilitated from the stroke, but both of them start needing some kind of care. Dad needs a little bit of help. One side of his body isn't working as well as it was, and mom has been formally diagnosed with dementia, but still understands and can function on a routine basis. But the family also understands that dementia is a progressive disease and is very likely to get worse. So mom's simply going to need more help, and mom is going to be less able to help dad. So sibling number one, or child number one, lives across the country, is totally unable to help, isn't going to do it. Sibling number two really isn't interested, is very career focused, loves parents, but is not super family oriented, also not going to help out. It just is not in the cards. They don't volunteer. They're not interested. Sibling number three, let's call sibling number three. The good sibling is, of course, the sibling or the child that's going to step up and say, hey, mom and dad, I will care for you. So sibling number three is able to rearrange their life, sells their house, moves in with mom and dad. Okay? Moves in with mom and dad, sees what's going on, says, I'm going to care for you. Finds out very quickly that caring for mom and dad is maybe not a full-time job, but very near a full-time job, and they won't be able to maintain a full-time job anymore. So stays with them. It also appears that the house isn't really going to be suitable for ongoing medical care. So the three of them, mom, dad, and child number three, all decide, hey, let's buy a new house. Let's go in on this together so that we can make sure we have a house that's going to be suitable for us for the long term, because who knows how long mom and dad are going to live there. So they do that. Child number three takes some money out of their retirement and from the sale of their previous house, puts down the down payment, The house goes into mom and dad's name because, again, for financing purposes and all over it, it was really mostly for mom and dad's care. The idea was that among the family that ultimately the house would end up going to child number 3, or that child number 3 would have a fairly significant interest based on the money that they put down. Okay, that's the idea. That's what everybody, child number 3, mom and dad, believe is going to happen. And child number 1 and 2 are kind of indifferent. They don't really speak up about it, but they are aware of it. Child number 3 pays all of the mortgage and the rent, and they're kind of like, that's my contribution to. Not only did I put some of the money down, but I also am going to contribute to the mortgage, 100% of the mortgage maintenance, taxes, and insurance. Mom and dad live for a while. They live for like 15 years. Both of them end up dying, which happens. Sorry, buzzkill, unpopular opinion. I hate to spoil, but we're all going to die. So mom and dad die. Doesn't really matter how in this story because they end up dying. The dispute arises after mom and dad die. The child number 3 thinks that they're going to continue to live there. That was the original idea. They've completely relocated and basically put 15 years of their life on hold to provide care for mom and dad, while child number 1 and 2 went off and gallivanted around and didn't really have to stress over mom and dad's. But days after the funeral, child number 1 and child number 2 come knocking, texting usually, phone call saying, hey, when are we going to divide mom and dad's assets, sell the house? I want my money. That's usually the gist of it, right? It's not really about wanting to help at this point. It's how fast can I get my money? And that happens in this case. Child number 3 is like, wait a second, this is my house. I've done all of these things. Kind of my payback for everything is to have the house, or at least have an opportunity to live there or get some kind of significant interest. Nope, that is not what child number 1 and 2 decide they're going to do. And the paperwork, remember we're looking at the title and the loan, are both in mom and dad's names. Mom and dad in this particular incident did not have a will or a trust, so it would pass intestate. So child number 3 would be entitled to 1/3 of the house, but the 1/3 doesn't even get them back their down payment. They haven't been able to, they've paid for the mortgage for these 15 years. Siblings say, we don't care. You would have had to pay rent. That's what's going on. What happens is a legal battle over a real piece of real estate that was valued at about $650,000 with a $200,000 loan. So we're talking about $450,000 worth of equity, potentially, that would be divided 3 ways. It turned into a 3-year litigation with siblings arguing vehemently against each other with the most litigious attorneys. Child number 1 and 2 were unwilling to reach any kind of agreement. Child number 3 was displaced and was kicked out of the house because while this dispute was going on, the court at least decided that some kind of rent should be coming in. And at the end of the day, I don't even want to know what every single person spent on attorneys, but it was probably upwards of $80,000. Keep in mind, when I saw the order on this, the judge did not order attorney's fees. That means each sibling ate their own attorney's fees. So we're talking $450,000 in equity, the rents for a few years, divided by 3, minus out your attorney's fees. This was probably one of those cases that everybody was in the hole. Parents probably rolling over in their grave. This is the last thing that they probably expected or wanted. I have 3 kids. Gosh, them fighting after I die is like my worst nightmare. It makes me so uncomfortable that I'm willing to give all of them nothing just to keep them out of the fight. So can you imagine these parents that were like so grateful that child number 3 was going to take care of them, came up with an arrangement that they thought was going to work, lasted for 15 years. And keep in mind, in this case, there was other assets that child 1 and 2 and 3 were all going to be dividing. It wasn't like all of the assets were in their house. In fact, most of the assets were not the house, and they got passed immediately. I'll tell you an insider. If that other money hadn't been there, it probably would not have gone to litigation because nobody would have been able to afford it. I think in that case, actually, the life insurance proceeds and some of the investment funds that got paid out early on helped fund this horrific dispute over the real estate. That's horror story number 2, is your child wants to come in and agree to take care of you, but they've displaced their whole life, so they're going to get some kind of equity interest in the house for their contributions, but it's never formalized in writing. What did we learn from horror story number 2? It also comes down to the writings, because we're dealing with real estate, statute of frauds. I don't know why it's called statute of frauds, but it is. And we're going to do a horror story number 3 and 4, but not in this episode, because you guys have been listening for a while. So we'll catch up on horror stories 3 and 4 in real estate. But the takeaway from this episode, what I want you to take away from this is, if you are owning real estate or you're going to own real estate, you gotta be on title or have something in writing. Put it in writing. As we saw in horror story number 1, a text message and some brief emails work. Horror story number 2, nothing really worked because nothing was in writing. It was a disaster. So let's avoid the disasters. Next time, we'll talk about other horror stories in real estate. But spoiler alert, it's going to be the same outcome. Gotta have it in writing. My name's Rachel King. Until next time, Gavels Down, voices up.
Then don't just sit there. Subscribe, share, and tell me your thoughts. I'm Rachel King, bringing not just my opinions to the mic, but about the courtroom too. Your part, keep listening, keep engaging, and until next time, let's keep those gavels down and our voices up. Unmistakably up.